How to turn your pain into power so that way you can have a fast track way to building your confidence. So every day I work with entrepreneurs and working professionals just like you and helping them to perform better in their careers, their businesses, and even their personal lives. And one thing that I love telling them is that I'm just like them in terms of some of the struggles and the battles that they're currently going through. Because here's the biggest myth of all when it comes to us as therapists and us as coaches. People believe that we tend to have it all figured out, and that's why we're in this position to help you. And that's totally not the case. One thing that I love doing is hearing the stories of how people that I'm working with are going through the ups and downs of life. And as I'm listening to these stories, I can't help but notice myself in each and every story that I hear. You know, it's amazing to hear how much I have in common with some of the people that I work with. And one thing that's very important that I do, that I suggest all therapists, all coaches, but even you that's listening, I encourage you to actually reach out across that person and tell them that you're going through that exact same thing. Sometimes it may not be in the same context, but it's going through something like a fear of failure, right? You may not have that when it comes to your business, but maybe you're just not getting back into a relationship, right? So maybe you've gone through a divorce, maybe you've had a breakup, maybe you've been cheated on, and we have this fear of going through another failed relationship. And that's something that you can definitely relate to. And the reason why I say this, and this is where I'm going to go into the 3 points. And actually, I'm going to put a pause there because I really want to put some backstory to this. The reason why I say this is because your pain, believe it or not, is something that is very, very valuable. And if you take the time to notice this and actually know how to turn this into power, you'll be able to turn everything that has happened to you and you will turn it to something that has happened for you. And I love saying that because Tony Robbins has told us that the things you go through, life, right? It's not that life is out to get you and there's this man behind the scenes pulling all the strings, right? Like trying to make your life a living hell. Like, no, that's not it. But everything that you've gone through, if you take time to notice how this fits into how it can work for you, you'll actually find how this can be a pedestal for the platform that you're going to preach from, that you're going to teach from, that you're going to inspire people from. And it's because you have this pain that a lot of people can relate to. And that's going to be some of the points that I'm going to get into. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start talking about how you can turn your pain into power. So my first main point, and this is shout outs to February, which is Black History Month. And this quote, I wasn't even thinking about Black History Month when I came up with this quote, but it just happened to be a coincidence. So there's a quote by Martin Luther King, and he says, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can." I want you guys to think about that, okay? And ask yourself, why am I saying this, right? And I'll read it again. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. And that's a quote that I'm willing to bet that you guys have heard. And what this does, or what this means, is that when it comes to our pain, when it comes to our past, when it comes to the things that we feel a lot of shame about, by hiding it, it does nothing for the pain. It does nothing for the shame. And actually, it makes that shame grow even larger. What's something that I see a lot of things happening nowadays is that when someone goes through pain or some type of shameful thing, I've even had clients, male clients, that have been sexually molested, right, as a young kid. And as a result, they feel as though they have to overcompensate, whether it be through their physical looks or through their career. They do this as a way to protect themselves or to even hide some of the things that they have gone through. And what that does is it reinforces the idea that this is something to be shameful about. This is something to be afraid or feel bad about. And what that does is it gives life to the seed known as pain. And what we want to do is we want to cut the roots to this seed. We want to cut the roots to this pain. And by doing that, you will then be able to turn this pain into power. So what does the light mean, right? So again, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can. So how do you do that with your pain? The best way you can do that with your pain is by acknowledging what you have gone through, but then also doing that amongst people that you feel really safe around. Now, for you, this may start off with a therapist. This may be someone that you have to literally have sign and say that, hey, everything we say is confidential, right? Therefore, by law, they cannot share this stuff. That may be a place for you to start. Now, if you feel that, man, that is still really, really hard, something that I have a lot of my clients do is I have them start to journal some of the things that they've gone through. So the question that I ask them a lot of times, and a question that I'll ask you right now, is if you can go back to that 12-year-old boy, that 12-year-old girl, or that 5-year-old boy or 5-year-old girl, what would you tell them about the thing that it just gone to, right? The thing that it just gone through. What would be some of those words? And that is where you would start with your journaling. Now, by practicing this vocabulary, by practicing this new language of self-compassion, it then gives you the ability to share this in the safety of a therapy session. And what you can do from there is you can then start to share so many things with some of your close loved ones. This may be your wife, your husband, your girlfriend, boyfriend, mom, dad, whoever the case it may be. And once you start to feel comfortable around that, then you can really start to share some of your stories with people who may be complete strangers, right? Maybe even people that feel a little bit known, right? So maybe they're associates, maybe they're friends, but not close friends. And the reason why we do this is not for them, right? We do this for us, right? We want to do this for us first because we want to release ourselves from this pain known as guilt, shame, and all these other things that's coming from your past. Believe me when I say that this works. Now, to go further with this, something that you can definitely do to help shine light on this darkness is by taking your story and using it to inspire other people. Your story, because you've gone through this great deal of pain, it is something that a lot of people can relate to. And the reason why people can relate to it is because a lot of people, they don't know what making $1 million feels like, being married, right? Having kids, right? Buying their dream home. All these things that maybe you've experienced that has been good things are things that not a lot of people can relate to. But something that everybody can relate to is pain. The pain of regret, the pain of losing someone, the pain of failure, right? The fear of rejection. All of these things, even grief, all of these things are things that we all have experienced. And by shedding a light on this pain, it gives other people hope. And that's what it's going to do for you, and that's what it's going to do for them. So the best way to turn your pain into power, right, with the first point, is to simply start to acknowledge that this pain is here. And you can do that by yourself, then with a close one or a therapist, someone that is legally bound to not share your information. And then slowly start to branch out and share with other people that maybe you don't know, or maybe even complete strangers. Now, the second point to turn your pain into power is that you can use your pain as motivation. And this is true because as humans, we have two primary motivational systems, right? Two primary sources of motivation. And that is to move towards pleasure, which we all know about, and then to also move away from pain. Okay, so to move towards pleasure and away from pain. Those are the two motivating systems that we as humans, we all have. Now, to challenge you and show you that both of these have a good side and a bad side, let's take first moving towards pleasure. It sounds great, right? But what if that pleasure is an addictive source, right? In a bad way. So this may be like drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, right? Even money, to be honest, right? Chasing money to the point where it's getting in the way of very important relationships, right? That can definitely be something that can be damaging. Now, let's look at the good side, right? Moving towards pleasure is something that we all have because we all have goals and values. So being able to move towards, let's say, your dream house, right? In a healthy way, obviously, right? Or let's say there's a dream weight that you want to lift or actually be, right? Whether you want to lose 10 pounds, gain 10 pounds of muscle, right? Like whatever it is, like these goals are things that can definitely help us to actually put through the actions and actually accomplish these goals, right? So you can have pleasure be a good thing and a bad thing. Now let's talk about moving away from pain. And we're really going to dive into moving away from your pain in your past. So a lot of people may find themselves moving away from pain in a good way because they know what, let's say, growing up poor feels like. And that's definitely something that I can relate to, right? Like it's hard, it's tough. And because of that pain, we do not want to go through that again, right? So we want to work really, really hard, go to school, invest in courses or conferences or coaching, right? We will be willing to do the hard stuff to avoid the really hard stuff of something like poverty, if you will. So that can be a good thing. Now, in a bad way of moving away from pain is that there is the pain of discipline. There's the pain of habits. There's the pain of putting yourself first, right? Which could possibly hurt other people's feelings. But if we avoid that pain, we're going to put ourselves in a bad space, right? A space where we're not hitting our goals, a space where maybe we're self-sabotaging, or maybe a space where we're just simply feeling burnt out because we can't say no, right? We're avoiding the pain of letting people down. Like all these things could definitely get in the way. So how can we turn your pain into motivation? Well, it all starts off with creating a destination point. When you have a destination point for your life, you will funnel everything that you've gone through, everything that you currently are experiencing, you will funnel it all through this why. there's this very, very important concept. It's called selective attention. I love telling my clients about this, and I give them examples, same example I'll give you. It's like when you go and you buy, let's say, a pair of red shoes if you're a lady, right? Men can obviously buy red shoes, right? But let's say there's a woman, she buys a pair of red shoes, and she goes out in the street thinking, man, I look really nice. I have my red shoes, right? Like I just look really, really pretty. Something that's going to happen to her is that she's going to notice everybody who is now wearing red shoes because that thought is now placed in her head. Now, with my guys, you may have experienced this when you bought your next car, right? Whether it's new or used or whatever it is, it's new to you, right? So when you buy that car, you may buy it thinking, man, I really love Teslas, right? Or man, I really love Honda Civics, right? Like whatever the car is. You buy it and now you're so excited. You're driving on the road, like, look at me, I'm in my fancy new car. And what you start to notice is how many other people actually have that car as well. And that thought may not have been there until you have bought that car. And it's because there's a selective attention, right? Like the thought has now been placed and embedded in our mind. We can do the same thing with our pain by searching out and seeing how can this pain actually work for me? How can I use it as a pedestal to show me that life is still something that I can control and not be controlled by life? You do this by asking yourself, what is my why for doing this? How can I use the pain that I've experienced as motivation? Or something that I've talked about in previous podcasts, how do I take my anger and ask it the appropriate questions to show me what I deeply care about? How do I take my sadness and my pain and my shame and use it as something that can really inform me of what I deeply, deeply value, right? I'll tell you guys this, something that I deeply value is helping people to build their confidence and crushing their goals. Why is that something that I care about? It's because I know what life was like when I couldn't do those things. And it was a bad life. It was terrible. It was tough, right? And now that I know that feeling anxious is okay, being able to accomplish your goals, let's say on the third time and not the first time, is okay. These are lessons that I've learned throughout my life, and I want to share those with you, which is why I love doing these podcasts, even though I feel nervous being on camera. And that's why I want you guys to also check out my YouTube, because I want this to be an example that you can feel uncomfortable and still do really, really great things. So have a really, really big why and use everything that you've gone through, everything that you're currently going through. Use that as something to funnel all those things through. You're going to funnel all those things, all that pain, all that grief, all that sadness, all that shame. You're going to funnel that through your value, because on the other side, you'll finally get the gold, you get the value, you get the gems from it. It's kind of like when people out in California was digging for gold. You know, they'll put the little pan under the water and they'll like shift it and all that stuff, and the residue will go to the bottom, but what would be left on top would be the gold. And that's what we want to do with our pain. We want to shift it, right? We want to funnel it through our values. And then the last point, something that I kind of went over, but I wanted to make sure I stamped this point in, is that pain is actually the glue that ties every human being on this earth together. And the reason why is because pain is something that we all universally will feel. Pain is an experience that you, myself, again, everybody that you know, no matter what their bank account is, no matter how famous they are, they will all go through something called pain. And this is to a degree why people say that money can't necessarily buy happiness. And that is true. Money cannot buy happiness. But I also do tell people that money is very important, right? It's up there with oxygen. That's something that Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar said, right? Money is definitely important, so we don't want to act like it's not. And I tend to tell people that money can serve as a down payment for happiness, okay? Cannot completely buy it, but it can be a down payment. So let's look at this idea of pain and how it ties us together. Well, as I mentioned earlier on this podcast, not everybody's going to know what it feels like to go to Paris, right? Some people may not be able to afford it. Maybe some people just don't have the desire to do that, right? Not everybody's going to be able to buy their dream home. Not everybody's going to have their dream job, right? Like, these are things that not everybody's going to feel, experience, know what it's like. But because of that, we do not want to use these as things to try to connect us as humans, because people will tend to feel very distant from you if all you do is shout out your accomplishments and whisper your failures. What I want you to do is actually feel free to shout out your failures and whisper your compliments, right? Now, I'll also even say this. You can shout out both of them. Be fully authentic. Be fully you. But don't miss out on the value of telling people what it is that you've gone through. Because this is what, again, ties people together, because everybody knows what grief feels like. Literally just 2 weeks ago, I attended a funeral. I had a cousin who passed up in Baltimore. And I haven't gone to a funeral in a long time, and I kind of forgot what that felt like. But going through that, it helped me to understand what maybe some of my clients are going through, right? Now I feel more connected. Now I see what they mean when they say there's this dark cloud over them, right? Like, I know what that feels like now. So I want you guys to see like the value of sharing some of your pain. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, if you want to be an inspirer, right? Someone that inspires people, a motivational speaker, right? Or if you just want to simply help people, believe me when I say something like the hero's journey, which is something I would challenge you guys to look up. Something like the hero's journey, something that is very, very powerful. The hero's journey. As a matter of fact, last night I was watching a movie called Apollo 13. It's on Netflix. It's by Tom Hanks. So in this movie, Tom Hanks and two other astronauts, they go into space because they want to land on the moon. And about maybe 12 hours, maybe like a day into the exploration, if you will, to them going into space, they actually suffer a very bad explosion on the aircraft, right? And as a result, they had to cut down all the power because they were losing a lot of power. They was losing a lot of oxygen, and they had to conserve that power and that oxygen so that they can make it back to Earth. And throughout the time while they're trying to figure out how to conserve power and all this other stuff, they started to find themselves overdosing on CO2, right? So the opposite of oxygen. And while they're in the aircraft, they had to make a little like contraption or whatever in order to suck out some of the CO2. But throughout that movie, there was a lot of anxiety because we didn't know if they were going to make it, right? It was getting really, really bad. But seeing them go through that bad point in their exploration, if you will, it actually gave the audience something to connect to, something to be drawn in with. And throughout the movie, we saw them just get win after win after win, right? They were able to accomplish these small tasks like lowering the CO2, getting enough power to make it back to the moon or back home, right? There were so many things. Even the parachutes, which was the last thing, like the parachutes, getting the parachutes to work. Like, so many things happened during that movie. But that movie wouldn't have been a great movie unless they've gone through something. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. So again, if you're an entrepreneur, if you want to be a motivational speaker, if you just want to help people, it's not going to be help. You're not going to get to help people through talking about just your wins or about your successes. People want to see that you've gone through something and came out on the other side, because that is what gives them hope. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for enough hope for them to take action. All right. So in other words, pain is the connection. It's the glue for all of us as human beings. So I want to go over these 3 main points again with you, so that way you know exactly how to turn your pain into power. So the first main point that I said came from a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. Which means acknowledge your pain, acknowledge your guilt, acknowledge your shame. That is the best way to get rid of any of that pain or any of that darkness, if you will. The second, use your pain as motivation. Us as humans, we have 2 primary motivational sources, and it's move towards pleasure, but it's also to move away from pain. And if you use your values, you can use that to funnel any pain that you've gone through to help you to come out on the other side. And then last, pain is the glue for all of us as human beings. So do not shy away from it. You'd be surprised how many people will be now drawn to you whenever you share something that you've been struggling with. So this is Coach Wells, and this is an episode of how to turn your pain into power, so that way you can have a fast track way of building your confidence. Thanks, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast.